The summer of 1944 was a grim, brutal affair. 2 months after the triumphant chaos of D-Day, the fighting in Normandy had settled not into a breakthrough, but into a relentless, yard-by-yard meat grinder. The Allied armies, predominantly British and Canadian, were stalled around the shattered city of Caen, locked in a ferocious duel with the elite German SS Panzer divisions. This grinding struggle was part of a critical strategic design. Every Allied life spent held the elite German armour in place, allowing the American forces to execute their massive flanking manoeuvre farther west. At the epicenter of this resolute German defence stood a singular figure, an icon of dread, Michael Wittmann, the Black Baron. He commanded the hulking Tiger I, No. 205, a behemoth of steel whose high-velocity 88mm gun could pierce the armour of a standard Sherman tank from well over 2 kilometres away. Wittmann's reputation as the ultimate panzer ace was not fabricated. It was forged in the apocalyptic mechanized hell of the Eastern Front. He first saw action during the invasion of Poland and cut his teeth during Operation Barbarossa. Amid the burning wrecks and endless shelling, Wittmann learned that aggression and the sheer survivability of the Tiger's heavy armour were the keys to victory. Wittmann's career trajectory was steep and fast. He initially served as a gunner in a Sturmgeschütz assault gun company, honing his devastating marksmanship before taking command of his own vehicle. His relentless drive earned him a coveted spot in the Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler Division, the Führer's personal guard, where only the most committed and aggressive soldiers were placed into armoured command positions. His official tally of over 130 Allied vehicles destroyed, a figure famously and heavily inflated by Nazi propaganda for morale purposes, as modern historians like Anthony Beevor note, remained, nonetheless, a genuinely formidable achievement. While his overall figure of approximately 138 to 143 confirmed armoured vehicle kills, with about 120 achieved on the Eastern Front, per detailed analysis by historians like Patrick Arcter, is generally accepted. Its heroic representation by Nazi propaganda was often battle-specific. Goebbels' newsreels, for instance, dramatically portrayed him as slaying 30 tanks at the Battle of Kursk, though meticulous records confirm the number was closer to 12 to 15. His fame made his face appear in every German newsreel, his name a rallying cry for the home front, a myth carefully cultivated by the Ministry of Propaganda to remind a weary nation that its heroes still fought. One particular propaganda reel even showed him atop the turret of a Tiger, waving triumphantly amid staged fictional explosions, underscoring the manufactured image of invincibility. The Allies, too, knew his name. Intelligence reports often prioritized tracking his movements over almost any other single asset. It is known that Ultra intercepts often mentioned the Black Baron by a designated code, highlighting his importance as a high-value, tracked target. His confidence was cemented in his audacious ambush at Villers-Bocage in June 1944, an action that transformed him from an effective soldier into a powerful living symbol of German armoured invincibility. Operating his Tiger 205 almost single-handedly, Wittmann launched a solo charge into a British column advancing on the town. In a breathtaking 15-minute blitz of aggression and precision, he destroyed an estimated 12 to 14 tanks and between 13 and 20 other assorted vehicles. The controversy surrounding whether his unit overclaimed some kills, or if the British committed catastrophic tactical errors on that day, does not detract from the sheer terror his name instilled. British survivor accounts of the battle speak of a sudden, brutal and one-sided slaughter, with commanders unable to react to the rapid onslaught from the unexpected direction. That single action, played endlessly in newsreels, cemented his status as the hero who could turn the tide. Wittmann was a disciplined, decisive and professional commander, fiercely devoted to his craft. He inspired fierce loyalty in his crew, who revered his calm confidence. Yet, his success created a profound military burden. He was now fighting a defensive battle fundamentally opposed to the sweeping blitzkrieg mobility that had made him famous. The strategic landscape was collapsing. West of the Commonwealth line, the Americans had cracked the German defences with Operation Cobra, threatening to trap the entire German 7th Army in what would become the Falaise pocket. The continued survival of the German army now depended entirely on the eastern hinge holding firm. Wittmann felt the chilling pressure of being the last hope, a symbol expected to defy a continent's worth of Allied steel. The commander tasked with cracking the German eastern defence was Canadian General Guy Simonds. Simonds was not a charismatic general. His peers often described him as cold, purely mechanical, and an engineering mind who treated battle like a complex geometry problem. However, it was this harsh pragmatism, this ability to turn cold logic into victory, that the stalemate demanded. His plan, Operation Totalize, blended improvisation, technology, and calculated risk to neutralize the Tiger's two greatest advantages: its impenetrable frontal armor and the Germans' mastery of observation. General Guy Simonds solved the tactical gap between armor and infantry by stripping obsolete American M7 Priest self-propelled guns of their weapons. These hastily improvised, heavily armored vehicles, the first modern armored personnel carriers, nicknamed Kangaroos, allowed infantry to advance under armor alongside the tanks, ensuring that critical manpower arrived ready to fight. The most audacious innovation was the attack under the cover of night, launching at 11:30 p.m. on August 7th. To guide the columns and psychologically disorientate the enemy, hundreds of anti-aircraft searchlights were angled onto the low summer clouds, scattering their beams to create an eerie, diffuse, silvery glow, artificial moonlight. 4 massive armoured columns surged forward simultaneously. The sound of hundreds of tank tracks and engines was a deep, continuous thunder. For the German defenders peering out from their bunkers, the light was blinding and confusing, preventing them from distinguishing silhouettes or viable targets. However, war is chaos. As the second phase began, a large-scale bombardment by US B-17 bombers was scheduled to precede the final advance, due to a deadly cocktail of navigational errors and target misidentification, exacerbated by the thick haze and dust churned up by the recent Operation Cobra farther west. The bombers dropped their payloads short. The immense dust plumes kicked up by Cobra's 2,000-plus bombers had created localized visibility issues exceeding 10 kilometers. Yellow smoke markers, intended to guide the aircraft, were misread in the dense dust, leading to hundreds of tons of high explosives slamming directly into Canadian and Polish forward positions, causing over 300 immediate casualties, with total losses due to the short bombing incident eventually exceeding 500 across Canadian and Polish forces. Men emerged from the smoke shaking, half-deaf, covered in dust and disbelief. One Canadian private, recalling the terror, have written, "The sky turned silver, and then the world fell on our heads." The Polish forces, who were advancing courageously, found their momentum shattered. Polish accounts, such as those documented by historian Ken Tout, vividly detail the sudden and arbitrary terror. One Polish veteran later recounted the grim irony of surviving German fire only to be wounded by American bombs, a sentiment shared across the multinational line. This catastrophic mandatory halt to the advance provided the precise moment the desperate German high command needed. Commander Kurt Meyer, seeing the Allied momentum falter, called on his symbol of dread. The pause provided the stage for the final, fatal drama. On the morning of August 8th, Michael Wittmann received his orders: lead a desperate localized counterattack out of the village of Cintheaux. His mission was simple: restore the front line near Saint-Aignan de Cramenil. Wittmann, leading his 7-tank column, 6 other Tigers and escorts, pushed forward, aggressively, betting everything on the Tigers' iconic frontal defense. Wittmann, his confidence bordering on hubris, moved out immediately with his Tiger 2, 05 and 6 escorts. He was advancing quickly into wide, open agricultural fields, relying on the impenetrable frontal armor of the Tiger. Unbeknownst to him, he was moving straight into a carefully laid ambush. The Allied forces had set a classic devastating trap. To the west, Canadian Shermans from the Sherbrooke Fusilier Regiment were concealed behind the stone walls of a chateau. To the east, hidden deep within the woods of Cintheaux, were tanks from the British Northamptonshire Yeomanry. The Allies had deployed their counterweapon, the Sherman Firefly. This tank mounted the powerful British 17-pounder gun, one of the few standard Allied tank guns capable of reliably defeating the Tiger's heavy armour at combat range. The Allied strategy was simple. Use the superior mobility of their Shermans to gain a flanking position and exploit the Tiger's one major weakness, its thin side and rear armour. The 7 Tiger column drove into the trap. Hidden just 150 metres away, British Sergeant Joe Ekins of the Northamptonshire Yeomanry waited. Ekins was a gunner in a Firefly named A3. In the terrifying silence, Ekins received the order to fire. Over the next 12 minutes, in a stunning display of marksmanship and crew coordination, Ekins reportedly fired multiple rounds and destroyed 3 of the enemy Tigers in quick succession, fundamentally breaking the back of Wittmann's desperate counterattack and clearing the immediate path for the final kill. 2 more Tigers from Wittmann's column were swiftly eliminated by the flanking Canadian forces, confirming the effectiveness of the coordinated multinational ambush strategy. Wittmann's Tiger was next. Inside, his crew, including his veteran gunner Balthasar Bobby Wall, driver Heinrich Reimers, radio operator Günther Bolt, and loader Rudolf Hirscher, all knew the gravity of the assault. His trusted gunner Balthasar Bobby Wall, a decorated ace in his own right, credited with over 100 kills, was peering through the smoke and haze, tragically failing to spot the concealed flankers lurking in the dense woods. The final, unused 88mm round would remain tragically loaded in his breech. The initial shot, or shots, from the flanking Fireflies erupted with a sharp crack, a high-velocity sound. The armour-piercing round sliced through the Tiger's most vulnerable spot, the left rear hull, penetrating the engine compartment and igniting the internal ammunition storage. Inside Tiger 205, Wittmann, who had perhaps time for only a single internal reflection of fatal certainty that he had gambled everything on one last charge, would have seen only a searing white flash through his periscope before the world was ripped apart. The resulting explosion was instantaneous and immense, tearing the Tiger's massive turret violently from the chassis and flipping it upside down. Burning fuel and exploding ordnance ignited the nearby fields as the surrounding Allied tanks advanced, crews cheering as the dense smoke cleared to reveal the iconic destroyed turret lying inverted next to the hull. Michael Wittmann and his entire crew were killed instantly. While historical consensus now strongly favours the British Sergeant Joe Ekins, who was credited with destroying 3 Tigers in rapid succession from his concealed flanking position, the Canadian claim remains prominent. Historians like John Pease and Wolfgang Schneider agree on the flanking manoeuvre, while others, like Robert Kershaw, whose forensic analysis detailed in Tank Men remains pivotal, analyse the evidence from the wreck that points most definitely toward Ekins's position. Kershaw, in particular, utilised detailed photographic analysis of the distinct shell entry points on the left rear hull, reinforcing the British claim and creating a historical consensus that has largely settled the decades-long argument. Alternative theories, which often suggested a high-altitude strike from a British Hawker Typhoon rocket, or even an earlier Polish tank hit, have been largely debunked by the wreck's analysis, which shows clean, low-angle penetration marks consistent with an armor-piercing shell from the ground. The Black Baron was destroyed not by a heroic duel, but by a coordinated, patient combined arms ambush. The destruction of Tiger 205 was a swift and decisive tactical victory, and its impact rippled immediately across the collapsing front. Wittmann's death was a profound psychological hammer-blow to the German forces. The counterattack instantly disintegrated. The immediate disastrous failure of the counterattack signaled that no man, not even the most legendary ace, could reverse the strategic situation. This realization caused an immediate devastating drop in morale among units like the 12th SS Hitlerjugend Division, who were heavily reliant on Tiger support and the psychological presence of their hero. Soldier diaries recovered later detailed an immediate devastating drop in morale. The one man they believed could hold the line was gone. The news of his death, suppressed by command, spread by word of mouth with the speed of panic, leading to faster retreats and less disciplined resistance. Commander Kurt Meyer later wrote in his memoirs that he intentionally avoided an official announcement of Wittmann's death to prevent total psychological breakdown among the troops. Records show that over 1,000 German soldiers abandoned their posts or heavy equipment that day alone, contributing significantly to the nearly 10,000 total desertions the German army suffered in the month of August. In Berlin, his death was initially concealed. Upon confirming the kill, the Canadian and British lines erupted with relieved reports. Propaganda photographers quickly captured images of the devastated wreck of Tiger 205, sealing the symbolic victory. General Meyer could no longer plug the gaping hole created by Operation Totalize. The German resistance on the eastern flank began to collapse under renewed Allied pressure. This psychological collapse directly exacerbated the loss of material. Over 200 German tanks were abandoned by fleeing troops in August alone, a figure that contributed heavily to the total German loss of roughly 1,500 tanks and heavy guns across the entire Normandy campaign. Had Wittmann's attack been successful, even a few days' delay might have allowed 5,000 more troops to escape the impending encirclement. As historian Max Hastings notes, the pocket's closure was hastened by such blows. His demise sealed the fate of tens of thousands of trapped soldiers, ensuring the swifter closure of the Falaise pocket. While approximately 40,000 German troops did manage to escape the rapidly closing pincers of the pocket, Wittmann's death ensured that number was not significantly higher. Had his counterattack successfully delayed the Allied advance by even 48 hours, it is conceivable that thousands more men and a substantial quantity of heavy equipment might have been saved from the encirclement, prolonging the war in France. The closing of the Falaise pocket by late August 1944 was the decisive engagement of the entire Battle of Normandy, leading to the capture or death of up to 50,000 German soldiers. Wittmann's death marked a tipping point. It marked the conclusive end of the age of the tank ace, where individual heroism and superior German armour could reliably defy collective Allied power. The ambush validated the essential Allied strategy: overwhelming force, combined with tactical innovation and combined arms doctrine. The destruction of Tiger 205 highlighted the crucial systemic flaw of German heavy armour, its overwhelming reliance on frontal protection. This vulnerability, thin side armour exposed during flanking manoeuvres, directly influenced the next generation of tank design. Post-war tank development shifted emphasis away from simple thickness towards sloped armour and a better, all-around defensive profile, prioritizing mobility and survivability over brute frontal defense. The American M26 Pershing and the British Centurion, developed soon after, incorporated lessons learned from the costly encounters with the Tiger and the effectiveness of flanking attacks. These lessons were later codified in NATO combined arms doctrine, emphasizing the necessity of integrated infantry, artillery, and air support to neutralize enemy armor, the very doctrine successfully deployed against Wittmann at Saint-Aignan-de-Cramonil. The principles remain relevant today, powerfully echoed in modern conflicts. For example, the use of small mobile anti-tank teams deploying Javelin and N-Law missiles to flank and destroy highly modern Russian T-90 tanks in the 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine is a clear modern parallel to the Sherman Firefly's decisive maneuver. The goal remains the same: strike the thin side armor or rear deck, often leading to a catastrophic turret flip, a fatal lesson the Tiger had taught the world. Furthermore, the use of drone reconnaissance to map enemy positions and guide precision fire mirrors the effective artificial moonlight of Operation Totalize, highlighting how technology and combined arms coordination defeated armoured legends, then and now. Michael Wittmann's remains, along with his crew, were initially buried in an unmarked grave near the site of their demise. They were not rediscovered until 1983 by a team seeking the historical wreck of Tiger 205, and their reburial at the Larkham German War Cemetery in Normandy finally brought a formal, quiet closure to the legend. Despite the end of his battlefield career, Wittmann's cultural legacy endures, often debated in military history circles and revered in communities dedicated to war games like World of Tanks and documentaries like Battlefield Mysteries, as the archetype of the tank ace, symbolizing a brutal era where individual skill briefly outshone industrialized warfare. The final image, the wrecked, turretless Tiger 205 lying in a quiet French field, was a lasting symbol of faded German invincibility. The war that created heroes now devoured them, and with it, the myth of invincibility died.